Calling all units, calling all units. Donut Shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.
Hey, welcome back to the Donut Shop podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome everybody and Anthony Pesare, Donut Shop podcast, where the coffee's strong and the guests are real and the stories come straight from the streets. As I said, today's guest is Anthony Pesare, a retired major with the Rhode Island State Police and former chief of Middleton. And now he's the author behind the Gino Peterson crime fiction series, drawing from real organized crime investigations that he worked while in Rhode Island. He's turned gritty cases into compelling novels like They Always Win and Back in the Game, weaving fact and fiction to keep you guessing. We'll dive into how policing real mafia investigations inspired his writing and what it's like to reshape the truth into the narrative. So from going undercover wiretaps to plot twists at any page, this episode's going to dive deep into that. So let's get into it. So as I said, welcome, Anthony. How's it going, man?
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate being able to talk to you and welcome to your audience.
Yeah. So what do you like? You go by, usually you go by the highest rank that you've completed at a certain agency. So do people call you chief?
Yeah, they still call me chief. Yeah, they still call me chief. And so when I retired from the state police, which was my first law enforcement appointment, I retired as a major, which was second in command.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was.
So how many state police I know Rhode Island's not huge, but how many state police in Rhode Island?
There's probably about 300 now. When I was there, probably around 200. But I was an operations major, so I was in charge of uniform detectives, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, okay. So yeah, technically pretty much is the same size as my police department that I work for. But but I'm assuming you've got municipalities, of course, throughout and sheriff's offices, or you guys, the state police, handle? Because there is sometimes a discussion in the Northeast. They don't always have sheriffs. The state police covers either help out for local agencies or what's the word? ASCs that are unincorporated.
Exactly. So in Rhode Island, being a small state, the sheriff's department actually only transports prisoners. They don't have any patrol. In Rhode Island, the Rhode Island State Police have jurisdiction throughout the state. So unlike some Midwestern and Western departments, we perform a uniform function, but we also provide investigative services throughout the state of Rhode Island. When I started in the early 70s, some of the local rural areas of Rhode Island didn't have full-time police departments. So we actually did a lot of investigations and that sort of thing. So, with some other states like Georgia, you have the Georgia Highway Patrol, and then you have the Georgia Bureau of Investigations.
Right.
We had, not exclusive jurisdiction, but jurisdiction throughout the state.
Yeah, because in Florida, we have and Florida's really sort of divided. I was talking about this yesterday. Some guys in South Florida, what would be the state police or the state trooper, those in South Florida, they're mostly highway patrol, and they're called FHP, Florida Highway Patrol. But north of Orlando, across the center of the state, it's they handle regular calls for service too, like domestics, shoplifting, stuff like that too. So figured I'd just keep kind of rambling on while you're fixing something.
I'm sorry. I have a problem. So I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah. No, I was just saying how in Florida it's kind of split with how the highway patrol, the state troopers. That in South Florida they do a lot of mostly highway work.
Right.
But like north of Central Florida, so North Florida and then the Panhandle, they will handle domestic calls, shoplifting. Your basic calls that maybe police departments would do. So,
right. Right.
But yeah, so every state's got different things. But I know, in the Northeast, I've heard that the troopers or the state police are usually much stronger as far as what their roles are in day-to-day policing.
It's not like big states where you have a county sheriff and there's the police and the local police. Because we're so small that
Yeah.
counties get off the ground. So
Yeah.
in that way, um, there are fewer turf battles. Not that there aren't turf battles, but as you know, law enforcement are always going to have that, but less, I think, in Rhode Island and less. Um, so when I started in the 70s, it was really bad as far as, we were all silos, the state police, the province police, and those silos were terrible because the only ones who gained from it were the criminals because we weren't talking to each other. So I've seen I've seen in the over 40 years of being in law enforcement that those silos have been broken down. I mean, they'll always be there, but at least they're broken down and we're talking to each other. So I think,
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah. I mean, we have like county, I don't know if I'm going to get a defense attorney upset or riled up or whatever, but we have like county signal chats that, that officers will be in a broad chat room of hundreds of police officers.
okay.
Sometimes guys that are with the sheriff's office will come in and say, "Hey, FYI, our street crimes guys or our burglary task force are working a case in this area, and we're following a group, and we think they're going into this jurisdiction." So some of the tech savvy, it wouldn't necessarily be something to like break, come over some department's main channel, but they may kind of put it in just to give sort of a heads up, hey, we're running this over into here or something like that. So not covert. And I know when I first started, we were just coming off of like the Nextel era, and you used to have the Nextel phones that
All right.
were walkie talkies. So
Yeah.
guys were doing Nextel policing, so they'd be chirping each other on the Nextels and not on their actual police radios. So they were doing that. So it's not that these text groups do that sort of thing, but it's also a good way that somebody will just put, maybe like a homeless person or a person that's transient that you could tell from arrest records have bounced around city to city. Or maybe not arrest records, because they'll put up a picture and they'll go, "Hey, has anybody seen this guy before? Does anybody know it?" And it's faster than some of these bulletins that the detectives might put out eventually over emails that are countywide. These little group chats can be helpful for quick investigations.
Sure.
and and it probably destroys what it was in the 70s, like the silos, like you said, where nobody was communicating. So now people sometimes are over communicating.
Yeah, I know. One interesting investigative tool that we have in New England, I'm sure it's throughout the country, but we have the New England State Police Information Network, which is an intelligence gathering thing for the New England states. And they have a deconfliction system where if I'm working a narcotics investigation and I'm zeroing in on a specific house, I can plug that house into the Nespin system. I don't have to give up my informant or anything like that, just so they know. So then if they get a report that the Tucker police are looking at the same house and going to execute a search warrant, they just pick up the phone and call the agency and say, "Hey, you better give Pawtucket a call. They're about to do something." And then you can coordinate it so you don't have these blue on blue situations. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it just communications is the key, as you know, the police work. And most crimes get solved by talking to people. In spite of everything we see on television, CSI and all that, nobody walks into a room and solves the crime. And basically, it always comes down to just talking to people and, witnesses and people that, victims and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think you can make policing as complicated as you want, but basically it's a people person job, and you have to be able to relate to people, even in uniform. You know that when you walk out to a car, the way you walk up to it, the attitude that you have, sort of disarms people, the good people anyway.
Yeah. It's I'm big on that. My physical presentation, my initial contact is always something to try and kind of like disarm the person mentally, so that they're not hyped up because I don't want to fight anybody. I don't want to argue with anybody. So if you come at them a little bit better, it works. It works.
Mm.
So
There was, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Yeah, go.
I was going to say, when I was chief in Middletown, uh, I was a stickler for appearance, uniform appearance. And so they would ask me, why? Why? I said, well, you probably don't believe this, but the FBI did a study of cop killers. And the thing they said was, one of the things that they evaluated before they attacked the police officer was how he or she looked. If they were disheveled, if they were out of shape, if they looked like they were sloppy and didn't care about their appearance, they figured they were, or, they had a good shot of attacking the police officer. But if the police officer was squared away, hat or whatever the uniform was, they were leery of that because it said to them that, if I go after this person, then I'm going to be in the fight of my life. So
Yeah, the odds might be different, and
yeah,
the odds are made based on physical appearance, on presentation, on the first step of it is yeah, your presentation, your presence, your physical presence.
right.
So
And the way you talk to people, your demeanor, you
yeah.
can control the situation with your voice. I'm sure you know this. Sometimes rather than having to use any tool, the tone of your voice and the respect that sometimes you get based on how you speak to people and your tenor, that sort of thing. So I've always tried to tell everyone that they should, keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So so the state police is where kind of got your chops in with the whole with the mafia and stuff like that, and these mafia investigations. Is that where you got your background for it?
Yeah. So when I came on the state police, it was 1974. And like most people, I spent 5 years on the road and then I went into detectives. At one point, when I was in detectives, I was selected to go into what's called in Rhode Island the intelligence unit. In the intelligence unit's primary responsibility was organized crime. Back in the 70s in Rhode Island, there were like three seats of power. There was the Catholic Church, very powerful in Rhode Island. There was state government, obviously powerful, and there was organized crime. And so those three clashed and wanted power. Uh, and so we targeted Italian American organized crime because they were the predominant organized crime group in Rhode Island. Some of these other groups that have become more powerful were not as powerful, and mob controlled Rhode Island and all of New England. And the patriarchal crime family had strong ties to the New York families. And so our job was to investigate organized crime individuals. We used wiretaps, we used cloning of telephones. We went up on telephone poles and put in wires.
Yeah.
Thing. Surveillance, of course. Surveillance. And the biggest thing I saw from the time I started in the intelligence until now was the RICO statute, which, for your listeners, know it's a statute that attacks organizations rather than individuals. So what would happen when I first started, if you picked up a mobster before RICO, they wouldn't say anything and they would just go do their time. But after RICO, because RICO, if you're part of an organization and there's a murder, everyone in that organization could be held liable for that murder. So mobsters were looking at big money. I mean, big
Yeah. Time. Yeah.
amounts of time. So they would be going to jail for 15, 20 years. And so they started babbling as soon as you pick them up. And
Yeah.
that was the new trend.
So that's where I mean, I'm sure the term rat came in before that, but that's definitely probably where it took hold because you pinch a guy especially at the proper level, they may turn rat real quick because they got to protect themselves and then they're protecting other people. They may not be the guy that pulled the trigger, but because they can help, even though they weren't the guy that pulled the trigger, by helping, it could give them a little bit of clemency or a little bit of safety, at least from the legal system. Maybe not from the mob.
No, yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, the mob is very unforgiving, very unforgiving. It's so
So, how long were you doing that for in like the intelligence bureau?
I was
in the
there for
mob?
about 5 years before I got promoted, and then I became the assistant detective commander for all the units, and then the detective commander. But while I was there, you talk about informants. One of the case that I wrote the first book about, it's a fictionalized account, but basically what happened was that there were a couple of mobsters who were accused of baseball bat beating of a union official in Fall River, Massachusetts. So it was Frank Martellucci who was accused, but also Richard Moon Dioria. Because, if you're going to be in the mob, you have to have a nickname. That goes.
Yeah.
So, so they both got charged. But the thing was that Martellucci wasn't there. There was another guy, Focarelli, who was up there with him, and they did beating. But anyway, so their boss tells them they're going to go to trial on this. And of course, Diorio doesn't want to go to trial. He's in his 50s, and if he gets convicted, it's like 15 or 20 years. But his boss tells him, you're going to trial because we can beat this. Well, they go to trial and they don't beat it. And he gets this long sentence, 15, 20 years. He's in his 50s, he knows. So he kind of sits in the cell for 2 years and he comes up with this plan, which he calls the state police. He calls and spoke to the major at the time, Benjamin, and Lieutenant Mike Russo, and tells them he can help them solve the Dickie Cali murder. Now, this is like in the 80s. Dickie Cali was murdered in 1975. So they get him out of prison, get him up to the state police headquarters, and he becomes a protected witness. So we guarded him. We were with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we implicate 3 members of organized crime, Frank Martellucci, Bobo Marapisi, and Billy Furley. He indicates they were responsible for the Cali murder. So naturally, we use that information. We approach these individuals. So Martellucci says, all right, he's full of shit. I'm coming in. I'll tell you what happened. He comes up and says, yeah, I was involved in the murder, but he wasn't. He just knew about it because he hung around with us. Same,
Right. Yeah.
bro. Yeah. So
He's just gossiping.
yeah, but it's just kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of a brilliant plan to get out from under, but he had to be a protected witness. So he testified against Bobo Marapisi about some other crimes. Martellucci and Furley testified against Frank Martellucci, and we were able to get a first-degree murder conviction of Bobo Marapisi, a made guy, for the murder of Richard Dickie Cali, who was also a made guy, which is really, in that time period, early 80s, was kind of unheard of.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Oh man. Yeah. So you nailed those 2 guys, and as you kind of said, like, your first book, it's sort of, plays around, fictionally, because you're dealing in fiction, and as people understand, fiction and stories, and nonfiction would be, factual accounts of specific events and stuff. And so fiction, you just kind of use real life as your guide a bit, and then you can kind of deviate back and forth.
Right. I also wanted to be able to, Justin, to talk about my upbringing as an Italian American. And so from the neighborhood I came from, predominantly Italian American. So for me to go into law enforcement was kind of like a betrayal of Italian, of that culture of, that came from Southern Italy, because most of the immigrants to Rhode Island were from Southern Italy, my father included. They dealt with these men of respect. So if they had a problem with the landlord or an engagement, it's like that famous scene in The Godfather where everybody's approaching him on the day of his daughter's wedding. But anyway, so they were used to that culture, and they never dealt with the police, never dealt with government officials. because in northern Italy, they look down on the southern Italian. So that culture comes over. So now his, little Tony Pesare wants to be a state trooper. And so I talk about what that was like growing up. I talk about the training academy in Rhode Island, which was so difficult. It was 3 months, and back when I went through, it was like sweatpants and the sweatshirts. And I went through May, June, and July. So
Yeah.
it was barbaric. But I understand why it was that way. It's changed, obviously, so much. But so I talk about that in my first book, and then the second book is a continuation of that story.
So yeah, so it's a character. Let me I got a question about that, and then but I'm gonna drop a commercial real quick and then we'll be right back. Hey, what's up guys? Want to talk to you about Tasty Gains. They're a sponsor of Counterculture Inc. We love them, been using them, and I enjoy it. It's a little gummy. It's got like 1 gram of creatine in there, so you take 3 a day, knock it out. It's making a difference, and it gives me a little bit of sweetness too during the day. I can keep them right in my backpack in my car at work, and they don't melt. You can see this is the mango pineapple. It's my favorite flavor, but check it out. Use code Counterculture to get 20% off on Tasty Gains. So check out Tasty Gains. They're great. So get your swole on. Yo, what's up, everybody? I want to let you know I have a new website format. Same website, donutshoppodcast.com, but this time I'm running it through Shopify. Make it much easier to purchase items because aside from the hats that I have up there, Donut Shop Podcast, PVC hats, the blue line snapback, laser mesh, nice and clean on the inside, comfy hats. I have some other swag, t-shirts, can koozies, just some other stuff that I put up there. I'm running the website through Shopify, and so it'll make it real easy for you guys to go on and purchase some stuff and support the show. So thanks for tuning in and following the show, and don't forget donutshoppodcast.com. Thanks. All right, we're back. So but yeah, so you explain that kind of stuff. And so that kind of goes along with one of the questions that I wrote up. Do any of the fictional characters in your Gino Peterson series feel like altered versions of people that you once knew or even yourself? So is that you're kind of explaining that, Gino goes through those sort of things, but those are kind of tales from your own life.
Absolutely. And
Explaining his point of view.
right. And I wanted to get Gino's point of view, things that happened to him in the academy, things that happened through the investigation. Just an example. So the intelligence unit was, everyone sought that position. It was, well thought of. It was one of the few units on the state police that responded directly or reported directly to the colonel of the state police. Didn't have to go through the detective commander. So I talk about this sort of thing, and the reason I bring it up. So I was up there. I was initially brought up to babysit these 3 guys 24/7. And then eventually I was handed the Maripisi case. So I'm up there about 2 years, and my boss, Mike Grosso, says to me, "Have you ever thought about joining the unit?" And I went, "Lieutenant, I've been up here for 2 years. I'm not in the unit." He goes, "No, I'm not." We just got up there to babysit. He said, "Well, if you're interested, I'll talk to the colonel about it." I said, "Okay, talk to the colonel because I want to be in this unit." So yeah, and one of the beauty, especially for people from the New England area, they love reading the first book and the second one. Say, "Oh, I know who that is. I know that mobster he's talking about," et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it is a composite. It is a fictional version of what I went through and what the character Gino goes through, a romance and that sort of thing. But the crime itself is the Dickie Cali murder, and people who are from this area understand it and know what I'm talking about. And I just got to say, one of the joys of a book, and someone once told me, writing a book, and it's like having a child that you send out.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to come back. So I made a presentation once about They Always Win, the first book. And afterwards, a gentleman came up to me and said, "I just want to tell you, my father grew up in Federal Hill, and he was very, very ill for a while. And he said, I used to go over to his house and read a chapter of your book to him. every night. And he just felt so good to hear about his own neighborhood. So that was like an aha moment for me. And one of the reasons that I continue to write, because I'm not talented writer. I'm not a fast writer, but I'm a hard worker. So I go at it as much as I can.
So what led you to do like fiction or use these fictional characters and write it as fiction instead of something like a memoir or an autobiography or something that's just, to the point
Yeah.
and you.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a memoir because I didn't want it to be just about me. I wanted to be able to talk about state police culture, and that's in Italian American culture. Uh, I want to be able to talk about those things, and a memoir wouldn't have done it. Uh, and I also envision that this could be a series
Yeah.
because, like every cop, you have all these stories in your head and things, investigations, and I've done so many investigations. The third book I'm working on now is based on a double homicide I worked on. Two young people were shotgunned to death, like 18 and 17, uh,
Yeah.
by a wannabe mobster. So I think I like to be able to use all of that without doing it as true crime, because true crime is really a lot of work because you have to go through transcripts and you have to do
Yeah.
footnotes.
Yeah. Yes, you have to be correct. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a big point of it for sure. Yeah. Oof. Um, what's something that like the public has as a misconception about organized crime that you may sort of drive home that you can, because it sounds like it's a bit of like a teaching too, like almost like a class, like not a lecture but a class about, like you said, police culture, organized crime culture. Like what's something about organized crime culture that you sort of share in there that somebody can take away from it?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that when I ever do a presentation about organized crime, I ask the group, is anyone here affected by organized crime? And no one will raise their hand. And then I'll say, okay, how many people have car insurance? And hands go up. How many people have life insurance? And hands go up. How many people buy clothes? And hands go up. And I said, you are affected by organized crime every day because insurance companies set their rates on the amount of cars stolen, who's stealing the cars, and where are they bringing them to? They're bringing them to organized crime. I had a case where a woman had about $250,000 of women clothing in her basement. The shoplifters had brought her, and she was selling them. The tags were still on them. Whatever the tag said, it was half price. And of course, so that means the price you pay for the clothes you wear is determined by loss. And the other thing is, I mean, obviously, uh, movies, television shows kind of glamorize these individuals, um, but they're not to be admired because, like Mobile Mara PC and others, they could have had this outward appearance, but then they could snap in a minute and harm somebody.
Yeah.
The other thing is, um, in the neighborhoods, organized crime can actually have a good benefit. I'll give you an example. So Federal Hill, which is a section of Providence, Rhode Island, is predominantly Italian American. It's changed obviously over the years. So when I was on the state police, my aunt was waiting for a bus on Atwells Avenue, which is the main avenue. And she's waiting for the bus. Someone comes up behind her and snatches her purse, knocks her to the ground, and she breaks her shoulder. So she ends up in the hospital. So I go to visit her in the hospital and I say, Auntie, because that's what you call your aunt when you're Italian.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Auntie. I said, Auntie, I am so sorry what happened to you. I want to work with the Providence police to see if we can catch this individual. And she said, Anthony, you're a state trooper and I love you. But if Raymond Patriarca was still alive, this would have never happened. So that shows you that they had control over the neighborhood, but they also policed their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Policed their neighborhood. And I couldn't argue with her because she's probably right. And I made presentations where people, I remember one woman came up to me after a presentation. She said, well, I just wanted you to know when I was a teenager, I was at my girlfriend's house, but I left the house late to walk home. And this big limousine came up alongside me, and it was Raymond Patriarch. He rolled down the window and said, young lady, what are you doing out here all by yourself this late at night? She said, she explained to him what happened. He said, I will give you a ride home. And he took her home. And she remembered that. So
Yeah.
there's an awful
Yeah,
lot of
it's
bad, but there is
yeah.
some good that they do.
Yeah, sometimes, like, and sometimes that sort of a interaction gets portrayed in media or in TV, and gives them that sort of white knight look or that
Uh-huh.
Robin Hood look, even sometimes where
Mm.
they're, the de facto ruler of that neighborhood and stuff. Um,
I
so
mean, that goes back to Al Capone
yeah,
because he was smart enough to know that if he provided for the neighbors, so he would give them money, he would give them food. And yeah, he being was he being generous? Yes, but he was also making sure that because he knew those people would end up on a jury. And
mhm.
so they've always, done acts of kindness, give people money and that sort of thing. So yeah, I've seen them do a lot of good, but I know the only things they're interested in is money and power. And
Yeah,
I think that's why they do a lot of the good deeds, so to speak. But ultimately, they're cowards. They're cowards, and they're really despicable people. And they just doesn't matter what kind of government we have. It's got nothing to do with Democrat or Republic or anything like that. All they care about is making money.
yeah.
Like,
And in that sort of sense, and not to knock you and say that you didn't clean up Rhode Island and get rid of all of them, but since your time investigating the mob and organized crime, have you seen any sort of change or like an evolution in what the state police, maybe even today, if you're still tapped in at all, what they deal with? Is it like decentralized, digital? Are there alliances? Is there guys riding around in limousines? Protecting young girls as they walk home? Like that kind of thing. Is that still going on, or is it different?
no, actually, so because of BICO and FBI investigations, state police investigation, province police investigations, the New England mob has been decimated. Everyone has either been gone to jail or died. There are still remnants of it in Rhode Island and in Boston, but it has not the power that it once had. So I think, like I said, I think those big numbers that they were facing caused people to talk a lot. So I think right now the intelligence unit, it's concentrating on some of the other gangs that have come up, the
Okay.
cartels, the Vietnamese gangs, and those gangs are very dangerous to police officers and investigators as well as the public. Um, we've seen the viciousness of the cartels and some of these other gangs where they've actually shot prosecutors.
Yeah.
Something, I would never worry about as a police officer, but with these new gangs, these new affiliations, it was an instance where a Vietnamese gang drove from Los Angeles to Providence to rip off somebody and rob them in the house. Providence police caught them, tried to get some cooperation from the victims, and they wouldn't cooperate. So as a result of their further investigation, they realized one of the robbers posed as one of the victims and stayed in the family and told the family, "You say I'm a robber, I'm going to kill you."
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think the threat is more these other outlying groups. I remember it's a long time ago, when Bobo Maripisi was put out on parole. My mother called me and she said, "Oh, Anthony, I'm very worried." I said, "What are you worried about, Mom?" She said, "They just let Bobo Maripisi out." I said, "Yeah, I know." She goes, "But is he going to come after you?" So I was thinking about that scene in The Godfather where the
Mhm.
mobster had his wife start the car all the time.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so I said to my mother, "It's okay. Mary starts my car every morning."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I waited for her to laugh. She didn't laugh. She just said, "Oh, that's good."
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I mean,
People ask that all the time.
yeah,
That's great. That's what they
say that's why they say we open doors for women and let the women go into doors first. They said in medieval times someone would be waiting on the other side with a sword or an axe, and they'd be swinging it for the man, and it would take the woman out, and then he'd just take a new wife eventually. So so you're doing the same sort of thing.
Another reason I didn't fear it, and I'm sure it's the same for you, even a career criminal, if you arrest them and you've done it by the books, they really don't take it personally because that's a cost. They always, refer to us as a cost of doing business, you know. And I tell young police officers, don't worry. I mean, you always be safe, always protect yourself, but don't just worry about the career criminal. Sometimes the guy that's never been in trouble in his life that you're going to arrest for, say, embezzlement, his whole life is in. He's probably more dangerous at that point than the mobster.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've had tragic ones where I work doing the crimes against children's cases. So you're thinking just some pervert that has digital files of children and stuff, oh, it can't be dangerous. He's an internet criminal. And these ones, two FBI agents sadly were killed and that kind of, during just a general, I wasn't there, but, like a knock on the door to serve a warrant, just to get his computer kind of thing. And they ended up, getting killed. So, terrible, tragic things. And so to that point, it's those people that maybe don't have a record that, or, are, are, are facing a big penalty and don't treat this as part of the game, like a person in organized crime might, like they know they're going to go. And a lot of times those guys, they're going into the prison system and they may be operating within the prison system or they've got family members that are already there and they assimilate into that process and they do their time and they, get out or win on appeal or something like that. So yeah. So the petty criminal or the smaller fish sometimes are the ones that end up hurting us or making it more dangerous.
That's
So let's see. So what's been the most surprising like reader response in your books, like that you get as like feedback? Do people understand like the real world stakes that you worked on, or they think it's just part of the plot? Like, anybody ever written in, and said like, "Oh my God." Well, you kind of told me some stories about,
yeah,
people saying that they knew who you were talking about.
right. Now it's a varied reaction. Like someone who's from Rhode Island has a different reaction than someone from the West Coast. And um, one of the just a funny story. So the second book comes out, and in the second book, the lead character Gino Peterson gets addicted to opium, not opium, oxycontin. So he's working out, hurts his back. And so I have this whole thing about him going to rehab and having problems with drugs. And so a couple of people called me and said, um, Anthony, that was very brave of you to let everyone know that you had a narcotics problem.
Because
I said,
yeah,
fiction. It's a work of fiction.
yeah,
And that's because every character has got to be flawed because we're all flawed.
yeah,
So those kind of reactions, I got those, which either I'm a good writer or the person thought I was in rehab. Um, Not that you have it, but I talk about how he struggled with that. So yeah, those are the kind of reactions I get. Most of the comments are that they, if you like that subject matter, if you like police procedurals, if you like the allure of organized crime, I get a lot of response in regard to how the life of a police officer and the life of a mobster aren't really that different. So as police officers, we crave promotion, right, and accolades, and so do they. They crave power and that sort of thing, and so do we. So, they get a kick out of walking into a restaurant and getting the table. So I remember going to a local restaurant one of the troopers I worked with, his brother was a waiter, and so we got a table right away. So it's the same thing. It, I get a lot of reaction about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, a little bit of that is kind of in the movie Departed, where you've got, they show both sides of the coin. Like, the protagonist, antagonists are almost, it's like you almost can choose which one of them you want. Are you protagonists with the bad guys, or you protagonists with the police? Like but you kind of watch that mirroring of two different types of lifestyles that just like you're saying, that they kind of work through that. So, all right, let me drop another commercial, and then we'll be right back. What's in the cup? Guys, what's in my cup? Blackout Coffee Company. We joined up with them. I've been drinking it, and I enjoy it, and I think you may enjoy it as well. So you can go over to our website and click the link, or you can just go to their website, blackoutcoffee.com, and use our coupon code to get 10% off. The code is DSP10. So go over, check it out. So there's a lot of talk with mental health and law enforcement today, in today's day and age, because in your generation of police officers, it really wasn't probably talked about and worked on and stuff. And nowadays, active police officers, and especially police officers that have made it through the job, are working on it. Is there anything like traumatic that was in your career that you've kind of worked into these books to kind of help as like a catharsis to, like, help you work through it by letting Gino maybe take the brunt of it or express it? And then that's kind of sort of like how your friend thought you were talking about opioids. Like, is there anything like that? Your wink, wink, former habit of opioids.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I started in law enforcement, after you solved the big case, you went out and drank. That was our release. And of course, I've had two of my classmates, people I went to the academy with, who had alcohol problems, and we see now more and more of that, of suicide. So office wellness is something that I speak about, but also Rhode Island passed a law which required every officer in the state of Rhode Island to take an 8-hour mental health first aid course, which is the basic. It's like first aid for mental aid, but a portion of it, the public sector portion of it that I taught, had a section on officer wellness, how we should be looking out for each other, and checking in with each other. And I love teaching those courses because it's so vitally important. People, now the stigma is still there, because we're supposed to be macho, male or woman, got to have that macho attitude. So that's still there. And the stigma of, admitting that is still there. But we have things like peer-to-peer counseling. So you just talk to someone that's peer. We have mental health programs, etc. So I've taught a lot of those classes, and the reason I do, someone once told me that PTSD was like a beach ball that you hold between your knees in the water. Like, it might not come up right away, might come up 5 years later. Who knows?
Yeah. And it's a good analogy. I love analogies. And yeah, you lose your balance a little bit while you're treading water, and then there it goes. And it's
There you go.
same sort of thing. You go on a scene and you picture something, or you see something, or you have too many drinks and you get a little wobbly, and that beach ball from this. Interesting analogy. I like that. I don't use that. Yeah.
Okay. It's all yours.
Because you don't know you can't credit the person that did it. So I won't credit the person that did it.
That's right.
But
Anonymous.
was there anything really like that you've had in your career, or or you were kind of lucky that had to like rise out through this, or that you've been able to use?
Yeah, a couple of things. So the third book I'm writing about the double murder of two teenagers in Johnston, Rhode Island. And I was one of the first detectives on the scene, and I could still see, because they were shot while they were sitting in the car, boyfriend, girlfriend. And the people that shot them thought that the boyfriend was talking to the police. But the thing is, the thing that haunts me is that the first shot caught her on the side of the face and then ripped the side of her face off, and then made the front of it hit him right here. And to see those young people, literally tortured, uh,
Yeah.
it sort of haunts me to this day. We solved the case, which was really good because everyone has that unsolved case that they'll never forget. Um, so I'm going to process that in this word book. And the other thing
Yeah.
that I'm haunted by was another case. Foster, Rhode Island is a rural community northwest of Providence. And it was actually a disgraced policeman who had been fired for use of force, or stopped some kids in a car and whacked them with their flashlight. So he was off the job. But one day, those three individuals were working on some cars. It was late at night. So they were in this garage type of place. There was three of them, or actually four of them. Three of them were outside working on the car. One kid was underneath the car working on it. And when we rolled up on the scene, there were three bodies there. And one of the young men, he was frozen in this position, like he was trying to ward off the bullets with his aura. And then the kid that got away rolled out from under the car, ran to a house in Coral. And when we interviewed him, it was chilling because he said he was under the car and he could see the murderer's black boots walking around shooting his friends. And he knew he had to stay frozen under that car or he would have been a victor. So
Yeah.
that's another one I won't ever forget, And
Yeah.
I think, how I cope with it. I mean, I like to work out and I do CrossFit, and that to me,
Oh, yeah. Nice.
well, I have a very strong support system. My wife has supported me throughout the years. And, it helps to be able to go home and talk to somebody about this stuff. And then, as I said, I'm still close to my classmates, and someone who's had a late experience like that, it's easier to talk to that person. So
Yeah.
yeah, right now the beach ball's underwater,
Yeah.
and I hope it stays there.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's perfect. And that kind of goes a little bit in line with one of the questions or one of the last ones that I have is that you've worn many hats as a trooper, chief, dean of justice studies. We didn't really talk about that. And
Yeah.
and an author. So how would you approach like mentorship teaching now and then just like passing on your knowledge and sort of like tips that you would give young officers as they're coming up? Like what kind of advice are you going to give or would you give or do you give to young officers coming up with all your
So
experience?
I'm sorry. So as a police chief, I've had many, many candidates come before me. And I think someone would make $1 million if they taught these kids how to be interviewed, because some of them they come to war without a weapon. I asked one recruit, why do you want to be a Middletown police officer? He said, because you have nice beaches. So the first thing I tell everyone who wants to get into law enforcement, it is, if you're in a college or university, do an internship. So you can actually see what, you want to be a police officer in a big city, go to Providence, do an internship. Definitely do that. And I also tell them, please, please, please develop another skill, because I'm going to have 10 people who have a bachelor's degree from Roger Williams University in criminal justice. But if I have somebody like that, and someone who's a certified EMT, I'm going to gravitate towards that person. Someone has a skill in a second language, especially Spanish, I'm going to gravitate towards that person. So I always say develop a second skill. So what you're doing is when you come to the table and say, I want to be a police officer, it's more than just wanting to be. It's because from my perspective, I want to know how you're going to make my police department better. And then I tell them, and I know you'll probably chuckle. I said, this is probably the most negative profession you have ever joined. You are going to hear negative stuff from day one. But I'm going to tell you, if you buy into that negativity, you're not going to have a good career. You're not going to. I
Yeah.
run into troopers I served with like 20 years ago are still bitching and moaning about not getting promoted. And I want to say, you're the same guy that bitched and moaned while you were on the job. Sometimes you're bitching and moaning to the colonel's best friend, and you wonder why you never got promoted or got any scores. So I say, listen, we all get negative at some point, but you have to make sure that if you buy into it, don't do this job because unless you enjoy it, unless it's joyful for you, and you make those differences, then they're not going to have a very good career. And this career is hard enough as it is without buying into that negativity. So that's
Yeah,
right.
it's negative, and it can get negative outside, and that's what people think about, but it's the negativity on the inside, like you say, the bitching and moaning and stuff, and it happens all too often, and I find myself sometimes, swimming in that current.
Yeah, I do too.
And
I did.
and I have a zone partner, the buddy that I eat lunch with every day, and he, oddly enough, has this deep positive outlook. He's a stern guy, all that kind of stuff, but he has a positive outlook on a lot of things. And so, I'll start kind of griping about something, and he just kind of goes, well, and then he just sort of like gets me to basically he tells me, like, without saying it this way, it's not that big a deal, dude. You're going home tonight. Chill out. Like, and
Yeah.
so I sit there and I think about it constantly. And sometimes I catch myself even before I started, when I'm talking to him, and I'm like, you know what? Because it tends to, you'll then hang out with other guys that almost make you feel like it's cool to do that. So it's like, man, like, let's see if I can one up you and complain even heavier than you're complaining. And then it gets you into that, like, negativity, current, like I was saying, or like a whirlpool. And as you put it, it kind of keeps you down, and
Yeah.
it can mess you up on your outlook to other people, because other people just hear you and think, oh, wait, I mean, we had this in our agency where a lot of people outside of our, we have 4 platoons on road patrol, and first platoon is your day shift, weekends off guys, my platoon. There was such a aura supposedly about the platoon that we were very negative, that we were a bunch of grumpy, salty veterans, and all we did is bitch, 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 bitch. And so they didn't want to put probationary guys into our platoon because they felt that we were gonna, indoctrinate them with negativity. Um, when my point was always like, look, we need to hand down this institutional knowledge to them, because we have a system in our patrol schedule where the weekends is all brand new sergeants and brand new officers. So you've got the blind leading the blind, out there on the weekends. And so by putting a mix of probationary officers into the seniors platoons throughout their year of probation, I point out that it helps them. And so some of these new sergeants that'll come on their own probation and they'll work on our platoon, they'll go, huh, you guys, these briefings are really fun. You guys aren't as bad as everybody makes you sound. And we're like, yeah, we're just bad sometimes to administration because we're experienced and we know how guys have gotten screwed over, or we know what's happened, and we know sometimes the full story. So we are the ones that are raising our hands when the chiefs come in and they want to tell us about some new program or try to shine us on with pizza pies and stuff like that. And we see through that kind of thing. Whereas the young platoon guys might go, oh, great, Chief's here, and he brought us pepperoni pizza. And, we've had 5 pizza parties. We get it. We know what that means. So I don't know. So, and you've lived the other side of that coin as well as the chief, uh, as an Italian chief. So
Yeah, exactly. And so when I went into the Middletown Police Department the first time, be- I went in with an attitude like, I can't run this like a state police barracks. It's a different culture. Um, and one that's not appreciated when you're on the state police, because you don't realize, and what I've come to realize is that local officers go back to the same house time after time after time, and they know everyone in the community. So I said to myself, I'm not going to make this barracks, because it's not barracks, it's local police. So one on one, I did that for maybe about 6 months, Justin. And then I realized there were things I learned on the state police that was just good police work. So I brought those in it and got those into the local offices mindset. So I asked everyone that I hired, so all I want you to do is make a commitment to the community and a commitment to progressively enforcing the law in a right way, not violating anybody's rights. So we found this common ground. And so I would sit in on roll calls and I would, ride around with people. But yes, of course, I'm sure many times I say, what the hell is the old man thinking about now? And I used to say the same thing when I was a young trooper. What the hell is he thinking about? But it's not until you get to that administrative level that you realize you have to have a global view of policing. And when you're an administrator, you have to deal with politicians, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Council people, mayors, town administrators. So we make a decision that seems 100% logical to you and it's probably right to the department because you're always trying to make the right decision. It's not always the right decision because we're human, but you try to. And then by the time it filters down, it may be, what the hell's the old man thinking about now? But so the only way to bring that down is to communicate. So I kind of had an open door policy. You want to supervise and say, I want to talk to the chief, or I would talk to people. Let me tell you, as the police chief, even as the major, I used to tell my wife all the time, I wish I had a degree in psychology because what I'm dealing with is my family, we're going to have a baby, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, who's more social, problems that humans go through. But I used to say, it's so important that they come to me and tell me what's bothering them, rather than them acting out. I think Colin Powell once said that if they're afraid to bring you your problems, their problems, you've lost them. So as a leader, that's what I tried to do. He said,
Yeah.
right,
Very important. Yeah.
yeah, he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, they should be of the mindset that they don't want to disappoint you. And they feel comfortable bringing their problems to you. If you lose those two, you've lost leadership. So I tried to do that.
Very true. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, it's I noticed that more and more, and I got the chance to kind of work in upstairs environment or administrative environment, being a public information officer for the department and kind of seeing the inner workings and the decision making that goes into stuff, and sometimes having a little bit of a little bit of say in at least the messaging. And I've always been huge on communication. It's you can't leave things up to guessing. You can't leave things up to guessing at home, just like you can't do the same thing at work. And or sometimes at work, it's life or death. And it also goes back to our mental health. And I've been that person that felt like they couldn't go to the chief, or that really could use somebody or a chief that would say things like the social problems that you're having interdepartmentally with other people or with what's going on, that you really need somebody to be able to hear you out and talk to you on that kind of stuff, up chief level or supervisor level.
Yeah. Because it's like a cancer. And if you let it grow, it takes over the whole department.
Yeah.
And one of the important things is, and I think you understand this, obviously, is to listen. So when I was the detective commander of state police, there was a particular uniformed trooper who was like, we considered him like the fringe element, like he had the wildest, craziest ideas. And so periodically he would come to me and I would talk to him. And then after he left, like my lieutenants would say, why didn't you let Dougie come in and talk to you? I said, listen, you have to be in touch with every element of this job in order to make good decisions. He might have some really wacky ideas, but at least he got to tell me about them, And sometimes that's all people want when you're leading them. They just want you to listen. They just want you to listen. So I was always willing to listen, whether he was on the fringe or whether he was in the middle. I always but listening is really important.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, very cool, and I love the idea with the books and stuff. Where can people find the books? And like I made a little banner for your website and
Oh,
stuff. But
thank you.
where can
Yeah.
people find your books?
So you can order the books directly from the website. You can
Mhm.
also order it on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's
I'll put
probably
and I think I saw on the website it gives links to those various retailers, as well as through do you fill the boxes, or when you buy it from your website, are you mailing it out, or is it going through somebody else?
oh, it's going through Amazon or or Barnes and
Oh, okay.
Noble. The only time that I get involved in retail sales is if I go and make a presentation.
Uh,
Sometimes wherever I'm going, they'll say, if you want to sell some books, bring them with you. So then I have to do that accounting. But most of the time,
okay.
orders are filled by Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
that's cool. So,
Thank
yeah, well, thank you very much. This was awesome. So I'll put the link for the website in the description, both on all the audio platforms and on YouTube. That way people can check it out if they're interested, especially if you have ties to the Northeast. It sounds like this really all like hits home. Hits to the family, of it in the Northeast and New England, would be huge for that. So thank you very much for being on the show. You have anything else you want to add, or anything you
No,
want
I
to
just
touch
want
on?
to thank you, Justin. Thank you for your
Mm.
service. And let's just, everyone who's in law enforcement, stay safe. And for everybody who isn't, stay safe. Um, I've had a hell of a career, and nobody does anything in law enforcement alone. It's always a team effort. So thank you so much for allowing me to bare my soul here.
Of
Thank
course, of course. Yeah, always welcome in the donut shop. So maybe next time I'll have a donut for you. So
All right.
all right,
Blueberry donut, my favorite. So just let you know.
blueberry. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I should have. I had a list of some wacky donut curveball questions, but
Oh,
and so you answered one of them for sure. So all right, cool. We'll stick around and then we'll finish the upload. But that'll be it for the episode. So thanks everybody for checking out Donut Shop Podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Calling all units, calling all units. Donut Shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.